Then Joshua obeyed him. Actually, it is not written that it is himself, the army of the Lord himself is the Lord, but Joshua regarded himself inferior than the commander of the Lord, the commander, the army of the Lord. So that's why he surrendered and he obeyed what he is commanded. He commanded. So from this part, I will explain syntax, what I learned from syntax and textual criticism. Then I will tell exegetical significance here. From verse 1, I put the important part with red color, the mipeni, mipene, Beni Israel. We can translate this word, usually we use before the sons of Israel, but the second one is used as the same word here. But when I was reading the commentary, there's also mentioned, it's also mentioned that sometimes Mifeni also can refer as a cause. So that's why we can translate this because of the sons of Israel. I just put this because I was like, oh, then it affect my translation here. Then jump to verse 13, polar question. The translation is, are you for us or for our adversaries? The question, this question in this sentence, you can see interrogative here, but it also can be made by what, who, when, why, or something like different. Then if someone asks this question, the other part can answer with yes or no. It's like yes, no question in English. Then the continue part is like, is the whole triple question. The first question has interrogative and another one continues with im or with conjugation or that means or. So that this sentence is made like interrogative, then the part A, then im, then part B. That's why you can translate this, are you for us or for our enemies? Then the verse 14 is continuation of that understanding. And he answered, then or he said, no, then but I am the commander of the army of the Lord. Usually we translate ki as for or because, but because of the understanding of verse 13, it says that yes or no. So when the commander of the army of the Lord answered no, he continues that the ki is translating but, and so that's why it's meaning but here. Then a little bit go back to verse 2, periphrasis. For me, this part was interesting because when we see should, verb should, we translate this like turn back or return. But for this, when I was reading the commentary of Gesenius, it says that it can be translated into again when, that's why when it comes with other imperatives, like it can be translated again, do this, something like that. So in this sentence, Vushubmol can be translated again, circumcise, like this. Then its textual criticism part. In 5.2a, it says the Septuagint understand the stand as the conjugation and the Septuagint understand this word as conjugation and verb, which means to sit in participle word form in Hebrew, Vushev. But when I was comparing the variants and BHS, I think most likely the original reading is BHS, then it is my understanding. Then if, let's say, In this understanding, I was a bit confusing because when I see this part, I understand that that sentence is saying again circumcised, then it's both imperative form, then it's related the related commandment. But if the word can be translated it sitting and sitting or in sitting, or I was like, how can it be how can it be affected each other? Because that hmm, so shall going to from this sentence I was thinking when I understand the 5 chapter 5 verse 2, it also affect my textual criticism understanding. Then because in this sentence it carries the same idea of the speaker, then carrying the related commandment. That's why it's if the word is translated into participle form, the verb do not carry the verbs do not carry the meaning and translated separately. Then also the 5 chapter 5 verse 2b, it said Shenit is absent in the Septuagint, but also I think most likely the original reading is BHS. So my opinion is Shenit is also included in the text because the word works as an emphasis here, because when the text is saying again circumcised, then when they added second for the second time, it's just emphasis. I was thinking like that way. So I also think about the possibility, or maybe it can be removed, or even though it's not there, people can understand it's the second time. But I was thinking, why it's the emphasis is there? I was thinking that uh, Lord regard the sons of Israel as his people, so that even though the generation is changed, he sees the people as whole understanding. Even though the generation is changing, he sees the people as his people. Do you get my point? So Lord looks at his people, of course individual, but also as a group. It's my understanding from this textual criticism. Then my conclusion is I learned Joshua's obedience from this chapter. Even though he experienced to conquer enemies, he was not arrogant but obeyed what the Lord commanded him, and he remembers covenant with the Lord. Then also the verse 15 is corresponding of Exodus chapter 3, verse 5, when the commander of the army of the Lord appeared before Moses. He commanded the same with Joshua here, but it has some differences. Then also I found something, but I was thinking maybe the time is not enough, so I just cut that part. Then here, the syntax affects a way of thinking of textual criticism. If I look at textual apparatus only, I do not realize how sentences work in a context. So knowing syntax issues helps me to know why or how it would be. Thank you for listening. If you have a question or comment, I appreciate it.
Whew, so fast
Oh,
and then very concise, and then you are able to deal with some important issues in an effective way. Actually, this is what I was expecting from you. And just what is it? The information itself, I'm always highlighting this. The information is not what really matters because you always get the information. And then the information may not be correct based on whatever is available today because the archaeological resources can be found again, and it affects the understanding of the context, and so the information can change. But what is really important is your ability to in what is it synthesize everything, the knowledge, the information, to produce some exegetical significance. In the sense, I like the way you presented. Okay. So yeah, you did a good job, but I think it's not over. I believe some of our students may have some questions and comments. So students, over to you. Anyone want to, is there anyone who want to ask a questions or comment?
Just a little comment on Joshua 5, verses 3. At the end of the verse, it says, Kibat Harot. So that one, verse 3, please. Yes, yes. According to the King James Version, it look like the same as your translation. But in NAS, it says that Israel at Kibbutz Hararot. So it's a name of the specific place, not really a hill, but it mentioned the Pacific place where the Joshua made the flint knives and circumcised the sons of Israel. Just a little comment on that one. Thank you.
Yeah, good point. And then it certainly depends on you. So like even dealing with the passage of the sacrificial offering of Isaac, the place was called Jehovah Jireh. So some of the translation choose Jehovah Jireh as the name, but some of them choose the literal translation of the name. Yeah, so I think it certainly depends on you. So, Kanae, what is your philosophy here?
Sorry, can you say it again?
Why did you do you prefer to use the translation, the meaning, instead of just the name as it is? Do you understand the point of Albert?
Not yet, sir.
Actually, the last one.
Here?
Yeah, the word actually it
Here?
is proper name. Yes, Iblat Ha'ara Lot. So if we translate these two words, then that will certainly mean the heel of their foreskins. But Albert is raising the point that this one refers to name, a proper name of a region. So you follow the literal translation. So you interpreted the meaning. But
Yeah.
Albert is trying to say that it is name. So we better just call it Gibres Ha'arot.
When I read this sentence, I remember our translation, Chris, maybe, if I'm mistake, sorry. But when I was thinking, oh, I think it was a proper name, but in this context, it's for me, it was natural to see it as a hill, like it's not like specific name, but it's just for me, it's normal or natural to understand the hill of the foreskins. That's
So
why I put the
yeah,
translation like this.
you just wanted it to highlight the connotation of the name. Okay, the meaning of the name. Yeah, but anyway, the consistency is what matters. So if you want to choose to go by the meaning, then I think you need to even somehow notate that this is the name. Okay, even those who wanna go by the sound of the name, then it might be most helpful to include the meaning of the name into parentheses. So I think that would be good. So yeah, thank you, Albert. Good point.
Thank you.
Anyone? I think, can I say one more thing?
Sure.
I think that according to kind of his translation is very, it's very literal, and in a sense of this one, the means will understand what it means the circumcised heels of the first skin. They understand that no female understand the heel of the first skin. So in Kanae's translation will be okay, but I prefer this one. Give that Naharo. Thank you so much.
Yeah, yeah. Anyone else? Please go ahead.
Hello, I have one thing. Please go down to the syntactical analysis. So here, their mind was empty. You see, like the first point, then the second. Yeah. What do you mean by empty there?
Oh, I didn't read that part. Oh.
Okay.
And in this sentence, the context is saying because of what happened, they know or heard what happened there, and their heart despaired of, and spirit was no longer them. So for other translations, it did like they suggest like it can be said lost courage and mind was empty. So they lost their courage to
Okay.
against them, something like that. So I use the word for syntactical analysis.
Okay, thank you.
I think that's a really good point. I mean, worth thinking. So I seldom saw my students deeply engaging with word study in a sense. So here, I think that I appreciate the question of Amos. When we saying their heart or empty, it means a lot. And somehow I like it. But is it when you're using this translation, people still want to know what you mean by empty? It's kind of a bad feeling, or because in East Asia context, emptying your heart is a good thing, isn't it? Right? Instead of feeling, you just make your heart empty so that you can feel something. So I know that you use this word in a negative sense, but always it's gonna be helpful for you to specify in what sense you're using the word. So I think this is the translation of masas. Am I right? Which can be literally mean the dissolve or melt. They hurt or melt. So like there was form, and then their heart was quite solid, but when they heard it, their heart or affected, and then it was just collapsing. That's the idea. So instead of simply using the word of empty, then because since it's melt, then there's nothing. But we can see the concept, but I think it would be really good if you could go deeper in providing the various meaning of this massage so that people can have what is it, the 3D imagination, so third dimension imagination of this word. Okay, so actually this is something that will really help your audience. So when you are studying a certain passage, just to make sure that you understand the word usage properly. Okay, instead of just relying on whatever is provided by Young's Literary Translator or KJV. Normally they made a good choice, but somehow you need to expand the meaning by just adding some various type of the words uses. Okay, so that's what I normally do because when you are preaching, and because since this is a translation, so the translator chooses one specific word, but sometimes the Hebrew mindset is different. So providing little different angle in of the translation and interpretation would really help. Okay, so yeah, but anyway, as you deliver the passage as a translation, anyway, you have to choose one.
Yeah.
So, but when you go deeper, then you can just engage with other meaning. But thank you, appreciate it, Amos, and then Kanae. Anyone else?
Yeah. I guess I have a question for you, Kanae, and anyone else really. It's in verse 13. Verse 13 and verse 14, actually. So, yeah. So it's about this commander of the Lord's armies, and he says and Joshua says to him, "Are you for us, or are you against us?" And then in verse 14, the reply is no. which kind of seems like a strange answer to me. You'd think he'd be, you know, one or the other. And I know just from doing my own presentation and, you know, working on my passage, when there's some scripture that seems a little bit strange, you have to really get the, you know, get the translation right. And so, and then as well as that, I just wondered if you'd had any more thoughts as you were studying this passage about, you know, what is really going on here, because the only thing that the commander of the Lord's army tells Joshua to do is take off his sandals. Like, that's the only thing. And then you go into chapter 6 and it continues. So do you think there's something going on here, something else going on? Do you have any insight, or does anyone else have any insight? Because I've read this bit before and it struck me at the time. I thought it was a bit strange that the angel says, no, I'm not for you, and I'm not against you either.
Oh, I didn't put the textual apparatus part here, but if it's not answering your question, I'm sorry. But like there's a possibility that this, can you see this law? Can be
Yes.
read like for other variants. It says Lamed and 3MSG prefix. So if the other can, like, they understand, it's not like answering no, but the translation says for him, then for him, because I am the commander of the army of the Lord, like, because only this sentence also, it has like variety of understanding. But
Okay.
mm,
I think, yeah,
Mhm.
okay. I think I kind of understand now. He doesn't just say no or neither, which is what, like, some of the translations I've got. He says no because I'm the Lord, commander of the Lord's armies. So because of that word, because maybe it means like he can't be on either side because he is the commander of the Lord's armies. I don't know. So kind of reading into it.
Well, yeah, I think it certainly depends on how we are going to understand the last part of verse 13, because it includes two parties, right? Are you, what is it, for us or for our adversaries? So if the question were like, are you for our adversary? Then the answer of no makes more sense. But since it includes two parties, then the answer of nay or no doesn't really make sense. I know that Pierce is coming from this kind of modern English in a sense, but somehow I think we need to really understand the Hebrew mindset. And perhaps even though we could see no, perhaps the emphasis is falling on his answer. I think this is something that you can address in your preaching or in your study too, because in our mind, we can approach that way. So if we look at the way how the commander is answering, there must be a certain emphasis from his own perspective. Okay, in the sense that's strange, but that's why it is somehow valuable to study more, and then you can go deeper. Isn't it quite interesting when you are preaching and then you just deliver this idea? Actually, that the commander of the God host is not asking one question: are you for us or for adversaries? But his answer is dealing with, the answer of no, as if he was only asked the question of, are you for our adversaries? All right. So then there is a kind of a certain emphasis. See, then people will be really, appreciated, and then in fact, they cannot really pay attention to those things. So this is a really good point. And good start, Pierce. I like it because you are approaching from a modern mindset, and then you try to know what it means by this Hebrew context. And that's quite powerful message. Okay. But I like the question. I didn't really pay attention to it. That's why it's quite amazing. Whenever you study, you will be able to see something new. The same passage, you read it again and again, always new. And that is the value of studying, Hebrew language. I realized this many, many times. I prepare my sermon, from an Old Testament passage, and then I believe I did a thorough research, as if there will be no more. And later, I could find something new. That's I was feeling like, oh, June, what did you do? You missed something, but it's quite natural. So what is it? Looking at the passage, especially English translation, from a little bit different angle and with the curiosity, is quite good start. Okay, because we cannot really read the passage from the Hebrew mindset. You know what I'm saying? Because we are biased and we are limited to our own cultural barrier. But if you see something, what is this? What is this? This is a good question. What is this? What is going on? Then go deeper and go deeper by looking at other books written in a specific area of syntax or grammar and what is the historical context. It will always help you to deepen your knowledge. That's a good point, huh? Anyone else? In light of what was asked by Pierce, I also wanted to ask you this question here. Well, you didn't really highlight the significance of the action that Joshua was asked to remove his sandal. And there is an overlap, and certainly it brings back to the specific place where uh, Moses was, asked to do it. So is there any significance, theological significance that, of course, this is really, kind of a holy moment and holy place where he was somehow asked to do something. So it definitely denotes the significance of God's holy presence. But from this specific context, what is the specific function of this specific passage? You know what I'm saying? So it might be quite a good point to make a comparison between the code of Moses and Joshua, and dealing with this same passage of being asked to remove their sandals. There might be some difference. And that's what I want to know. How do you think?
When I was reading, it's verse 15 here,
Yeah.
because Joshua is the previous leader of Joshua was Moses.
Mhm.
So it's my understanding, then a bit assuming, but I was thinking, because Moses was a great leader for him, then somehow I think he was afraid of being leader. But then when Joshua was asked to do the same thing with Moses, it's not like the same. Like, oh, I don't think that he thought, oh, I become like Moses. But it's like asking, it's like inviting the commander of the army of the Lord is inviting him, then letting him know that this is a place, that this is a holy place. Then you are in front of the Lord, that you are in presence of the Lord. It's kind of a asking, but also it's a declaration that he is in front of him. Then also I can not really, it's bit assuming, but it's also shows him that the Lord is with him. And then after this chapter, they move to the city of Jericho. So I think it's the kind of testing him to surrender before the Lord. But in this sentence, there are still, I can see the differences with Exodus 3,
Mm,
5, and here, verse 5 and 15, 5, 15. So it's not like exactly the same, but the situation is the same. Then it reminds him to how Moses obeyed the Lord, or how he guides the people with obeying the Lord, something like that. What I understand is like,
You are getting to the point that I want you to be. But see, when we are going through these questions, you could see something that you were not really able to focus on before. And this is really a good question to ask. And people will really appreciate it. You know, the way you address the issue of being afraid of a leader, and then somehow the comparison is there, right? But there is a similarity and difference. What is the similarity? According to your understanding, you said it deals with the significance of moving in God's presence. Am I right? And then where you can surrender yourself, right? And it has definitely has something to do with the concept of holy God. So this is the same. But what I could notice here is from the calling of what was it? Moses, it was not really in the middle of his journey. I mean, what is his job to lead the Israelites, but it certainly deals with the situation where he was called by God. So it just happened before he was deeply involved in his ministry of leading the Israelites. Here, Joshua is a bit different, right? Joshua is the leader, and then he is somehow already, carrying some important jobs. Along the way, he was somehow reminded of something important. So that is, quite different. And then, it's becoming powerful, isn't it? When you are just called to the ministry, God wants to make sure that, hey, you just come to my presence and surrender yourself. Acknowledge my holy presence. And when you are doing your ministry, it's the same. So I think you can just deal with those things, and it will be really a good sermon as well, and interesting points. Thank you. And anyone else? No more? All right, thank you. Kanai. Who is it?
Yeah, Doctor, I just want to ask Joshua chapter 5, verse 7, because supposedly it's stated here that, and the children whom he raised up in the instead them Joshua circumcised, for they were uncircumcised, because they had not circumcised them, by the way. So do you have idea, Sister Kanae, that the reason why they were not circumcised and that they need to do in preparation for the Passover?
So, Romero, what is your question? The sound is not clear. The last sentence. Can you give us just the one sentence of your question?
Yeah, in verse 7, it is stated here that their children are not circumcised. And I'm just wondering why they didn't circumcise. As we all know, this is a very important covenant that they should do.
Kanae?
yes.
How do you think?
So your question is?
Why is it they are not circumcised?
Why is there?
Why they are not circumcised? Because they are asked to circumcise themselves, but the children of the people who just came out of the Egypt, Actually, it was a, God's commandment, but the passage deals with the situation that they are not circumcised. So um, he is trying to say, why is that they are asked to be circumcised?
Mm. Oh,
It says they were still uncircumcised.
for like when I was reading, then understanding this passage, I was thinking because one of the reason is they are in wilderness, then but it's not good excuse to say that they cannot get circumcised. But what I was thinking is because the responsibility on it is not really on them, the second or other generation, but it's their fathers or their, how to say, their, I don't know how many generation passed, but the former generation didn't do that for them. So I think it was the important thing for here. The generation that couldn't get was not really, they should, but the responsibility was on other generation because they didn't, because for other context it's saying that they are complaining, they didn't remember what God, how God has led them, something like that. So they didn't keep the commandment, what the Lord commanded, or they didn't keep the covenant. What I understand was like that.
Yeah. I think, Romero, do you want to follow up on this, or is this satisfactory?
Yeah, I think Kanai is right, sir, because maybe because they are in the wilderness. I think that is the one of the reason, and maybe because they are since they are in the wilderness, uh, I think they forgot, or uh, I think they have excuse of the discontinuance of circumcision, and I think that's what I think also.
Yeah, I think the passage itself actually provides the reason, although it's kind of a reason, loose reason. But it says, if you look at YLT, then it says, for they have been circumcised, for they have not circumcised them in the way. So it highlights the fact that they are moving toward the promised land, and then it is, a marching process. So they were required to move on, move on. So if they need to circumcise their kids, then it will somehow definitely affect their schedule. But that is what is it, the stuff, what you can see on the surface. They could be somehow excused that way. But going back to the point of Kanae, I think Kanae's answer was good. It's still, something that they need to, continue despite, no matter what, actually, you can be excused, and people will say, oh yeah, it's understandable, but it's all about what you really value and what you really trust, right? Even though we are going to be affected, since this is the quite, the precious covenant, and that reminds us of the agreement, the promise of God, right? And they are just moving toward the promise. Am I right? And you remember that the covenant, what is it being, covenant of circumcision was made between God and Abraham, right? And then Abraham was given God's promise and covenant that I will multiply you and your descendants, and then I will give you the land. Am I right? So it was a continuation. So when they were asked to circumcise them, it reminds them of where this promise was begun. All right. So I think it was a quite important reminder. So, to be honest, when I was reading this passage, everything that I pay attention to was the repetition of the use of the English term circumcision, circumcised. It's all about circumcised. And what is the significance of it? Why is that Kanae is dealing with this passage where we can see this, the word is being used and on and on, on and on, on and on, without paying attention to the context. But, it's all about the covenant, isn't it? So the intention is there, the intention. And then what is the significance of this covenant? That is the question, right? So Romero, I like your question too. It's a good start. We need to ask, why? Why is that? And it gives us a lot of insight that can be applicable to the context where we are today, right? So people will understand, hey, you don't need to do it. But in our heart, you're still struggling. I think we need to do it. But oh, no. I think people will understand, right? But God is asking us to move on. So yeah, I think definitely we can learn a lot from this specific. So any more question? All right, so give her, Chikara, you want to say something?
Just one simple question. I also interested in why you choose this passage as mentioned. Yeah.
Before I didn't know the context. I just know the verse 15. Then I was thinking, I need to choose between 10 to 20 verses. So I think I will choose this chapter. Then when I read, it's really awkward. But then once I decided that I will go on, I will work on. So I just, okay, I will do this.
It happens. It happens a lot of times. I know that many of you told me I chose this passage because I need to choose, the passage that has somehow 10 to 15 verses, and it's funny. But isn't it interesting? You didn't really mean to choose this one, but somehow you have to choose. And when you are going deeper in your study, and you begin to realize something that you are not aware of, isn't it? And I like it anyway. At the end, I can say, praise the Lord. Okay, so then let's move on. Thank you one more time, Kanai. Okay, Phineas, let's do it. Yeah, you can start sharing. Phineas, I just saw it, and then you have a lot of slides. Do you plan to deal with all of them? You need to unmute yourself, please.
I'll just go quickly, sir.
Yeah, I think that the time is not really enough. But anyway, just to finish everything within 35 minutes so that we can spend more time in discussion. Go ahead.
Sir. All right, so I will present Genesis chapter 2, verses 15 to 25. Okay. So I will share first why I chose this passage, and then the background, and then the study of the passage, and then synthesis and conclusion. And so first of all, I chose this passage because I think there is a certain reason why Genesis chapter 2, 15 to 25, it appears after God's creating the man, and then before the fall, Genesis chapter 3, this story, it appears. And so I wanted to see the connection in between the creation of God and creation of man, and also before the fall, and the connection in between that. And so that through this passage, I assume that probably there is God's reign through human being. and then some kind of principle I think we may learn. And so that is what my proposition was, that hypothesis of this study. And then the thirdly, in this story shows the creation of man, verse 7, and then the tree of knowledge of good and evil, verse 17, and then the origin of marriage. These three important stories are connected in this story. So briefly explain the background of this passage. Genesis chapter 1, verse 28 is telling about the blessing of God. And then Genesis chapter 2, verse 7 tells about God's creation. And verse 4 says, it seems like explaining about the creation of God. And so that based on that background, so we will see the passage today. So in this passage, it is now composed like this way. And so as we see that verses 15 to 25, the purpose of God and man in the Garden of Eden. So we will see this passage. So we will see that God is giving the tasks in the garden, and then tree of knowledge, verse 17, and then verses 20 to 25 about the marriage story. So we will see then the diagram of this passage. So verse 15 starts with this, like God's commission on man. And then secondly, verses 16 to 17 is God's command to man. And then verses 18 and 24 is telling about, and so God's his evaluation of human beings' loneliness, and then also the with other creatures, and then the origin of man, marriage. So we will see the first, the verse 15. So through this passage, we can see that why did God create a man? So verse 15, we will see the God's purpose through this story. So we may see the main 4 points we will see on it. We tackle only four things. First, the first word, that is the took. God took in English, and so that is lakak. And so that from syntax, Walden Okano is telling about the significance of this word, the first word, this lakak, it is indicating the causative, is causative to the object. So the word took here, God took, it has the cause. God causes Adam to be put in the garden. So the main author, it is emphasizing through this syntax study, we can see that God's purpose for human being in connection to the previous verse, verse 7, why God created man and he put in the garden. So Harris says that taking means it carries against the will of the one who is taken, meaning select or being summoned. And so that the exegetical point here, God's creation for the man has a theological significance for his creation. Secondly, we have to also take note of the second word, the important word here, and that is the word caused to rest, meaning settled. And that is also word study. Harris tells that it has actually 4 important theological significance. First of all, it symbolizes death. Second, spiritual. Third, it is the fulfillment of God's promise. And then fourth, theology of the Sabbath. Genesis chapter 12, verses 2 to 3, in the former passage, the Sabbath rest, it is connected to this word. God put Adam to the desert, in the garden. So that so we can say that God, the purpose of God for creating a human being. And so there are 2 things God is giving for purpose of a human being. And first one is that is in this word, the abad, meaning in English translation serve, but Harris explains that it also means serve, worship, and obey in direct for thing or people for God. It connotes for worshiping or obeying. Secondly, giving the purpose is the second word is keeping. Keeping means from BDB, keep, watch, or preserve, or watchman. Holiday says that watch, guard, garden. Harris says that actually is exercising great care over, do carefully or diligently, careful attention to the obligation of a covenant laws and statutes, etc., or personal discipline involved. And for that, God is giving the second duty, and when he put in man in the garden, and that is for worshiping, obeying in the place, and at the same time diligently working and caring and protecting. So through this also we can see those 15, we can see the purpose of God for creation of man. 16, it shows that then the command, so how this serving and keeping has to be carried out. There are two purposes God is giving. First is permission part. Verse 16 it tells that says, the Lord God commanded upon the man, saying, you may freely eat from the tree of garden. So first of all, among the two command of God, permission and provision. So we will see there are two important points from verse 16. First thing is the word command. Here, the Lord God commanded upon the man. It has the is a PL stem, and so that it is emphasized. And then at the same time, as the word Okano says that, it is the cause the object to do happen. So it is emphasizing the subject God commanded and for Adam to do. And then second says that this word you may freely eat, and so that the Gesenius is actually the, if we translate it, this is actually is written in prefix form, so that it may translate it as future, you will eat. But in a potential language, as Gesenius says that it actually connotates imperfect tense, so that it is also telling about the permission. So you may eat in the Garden of Eden. So from the first, God is giving the command first, how to we serve and also keep the garden. That is by first, God is giving the permission. And then second, and we can see from verse 17, and then also we have to see verse 16, one more thing. That is Gesenius, also he's emphasizing that. And this, you may freely eat. This word actually is used in infinitive absolute form. When it's in infinitive absolute form in this sentence, it is emphasizing you may freely eat, but also it is focusing for the antithesis. The following verse, the stress actually falls on the verse 17, so that you may surely eat. The emphasis is on the but. So 17, now actually how man has to keep his duty, serving and keeping, that is knowing God's permission and for his rights and privilege. And then at the same time, more important thing is knowing God's, knowing the prohibition, so that the story tree of knowledge, the emphasis is falls on that part. Here we see one more point, or one point only. That is, as Gesenius is telling that the you may not eat. It is used for the permission, so you may not eat. And so as Wordo and Okano is telling that also on this part. So when you eat, you need to know the consequence part. And so from this, we can see that God is giving a free will, and for how we have to keep and serve, and by knowing God's command, and for having our free will, it connotes from this word. So and when you see the so then how we keep this God's command, and that is third part tells that, and that is verses 18 to 25 through the story of the origin of marriage. So for that verse 18 is telling about how then did God make the man be able to keep his commandments. First thing that is telling, and the God said, not good is the being of man in his separation. Let me make for him Ezer, his counterpart. So from this this message, we have to see that is first, Justinus is emphasizing that is the word here, let me make. When God make that, this ordinary form of imperfect prefix, you include at the end of the ash, and then he. Actually, this one is when it goes together, imperfect and he, it means cohortative, so that God is making for Adam, for the man, and so we may see also the God's creation part on here. All right, and then the second, we have to see that here, that is the word Ezer is the important part. Usually in English translation, it translates in as a help, but some translation also it translates as Ezer, just like the word itself, instead of using the help or helper. This word is very interesting word. From Harris word study, it tells that it's all the time, whenever this word is used in RSV translation, sometimes this word Ezer is translates as a crown, or in some one of the 21 verses 1 and 2, and other in the Old Testament, all the time whenever this word is used, it's used for God's help. I lift up my eyes to the hills, from where does my help come? My help comes from the Lord who made heaven and earth, as Psalm 121 verses 1 and 2 says. And this word is like it's very interesting word. It's referring to God's work. Just like in KJV translation, some as we know, usually the help, it is referring to woman, helper, but actually in this passage, some translations, just like KJV, it is referring to the work of God. Not like NIV. NIV says that it's a helper, referring to woman or person. Just like TDOT, like a theological dictionary of the Old Testament, also it comments that it is usually Ezer. It is for the help is for men, and then in Arabic meaning is it the original meaning of forgive or help in Semitic derivative, and then or the help it is also used usually is God's protection for his people, and then is when it's used as a name, a very interesting comment here, usually used for theophorus names, which refers to giving thanks to God for such an event that a child is born through a difficult delivery. The root is frequently used in Amorite names, meaning trusting in a deity. So through this, we can see that how that God's given command can be kept by human being. It is emphasizing that God's help it needs for when we see in connection to the origin of the marriage. So first of all is now we see that God's provision for man's ability to keep his commands. Man needs God's help. It is we can see it from this message. Verse 19, it is telling God is forming the other creation, and then also is bringing to man. So through this message, we see the important point is the word, 2 points we will see, mean and the living creature. The word first, mean here from, as Gesenius is emphasizing that, that is the location of the preposition mean marks is author of the cause of the action toward the previous subject. So the word, now the Lord formed from the ground all the living thing. It is actually sees that the emphasis of the sentence that is on the subject God. So doer of the creation, and also as we see the word living being, it is also emphasizing actually in textual apparatus says that in textual criticism, probably it be added. But when you see, for me, I have a different approach. When you see the textual criticism, which is might be the original thing, but I think there is also intention why this Masoretic or BHS, and probably it is added. I think we have to also, it's worthwhile to see the intention of the also writer also when they copy. I think also they wanted to emphasize on the doer that God's act, the emphasis of the part. God is the source of life. All right, so verse 20, and so when you see the verse 19 and 20, so how then God, he gives the ability for man to keep his commands. When you see that part, we will see the point here. That is the 2 points here. So first, the living being, a kite, like yeah, a kayat. Okay, it is actually a very interesting word as well, and from the Harris, and that is it means existence. That is deeply related to the name God, Yahweh, and the living being, or Hawa, or like the name of woman. The root word is very similar, and so is imminent in Genesis chapter 2 to 25. Yahweh in the relationship in the Garden of Eden. Also, is telling that showing that the very highly emphasized that God's giving his making human being, and also giving some kind of commission or calling, and at the same time very heavily emphasizing on the importance of God and the resource of God. God is the source of life, and so we can see that through this passage. All right, and then again textual apparatus. So it is now Septuagint, also the Syriac, and then also Targum, and then Vulgate. So it's actually adding all living thing, and so I think though the BHS has far much more the weight, the originality of that, but I think also there is also intention, very important intention. Also, I think we have to take note from those scripts, also the early church time. I think we have to also take note of that. Also, they wanted to emphasize the sovereignty of God, or the God is the important of the resource of humans' ability to carrying out the law of God. All right. Okay. So verses the next verses 21 and 22. It is telling the after God's it is telling the creation of God, how God created woman. Through this story, also we may see also some important message. So first of all, there is verse 21, the word deep sleep. It is also a BDB and Harris also emphasizing that actually the word deep sleep, as Isaiah chapter 29 verse 10, or some Bible verses, it is emphasizing on the the supernatural agency. It is relating to, it's not only just a deep sleep or good sleep, but it's always whenever this word is used for the spirituality is involved. And then also the word built, when God built, verse 22, we have to also put our also attention here. This word built, bana, it is very interesting word, because as we see in Genesis creation, Genesis narrative, Genesis chapter 1, God created everything. But Genesis chapter 2, in this passage, God is making woman out of man's rib. It is telling about, is usually used as an idiomatic expression, increasing offspring, so that we can see that woman, just like God didn't finish the all creation in Genesis chapter 1 is actually finished, but God has deeper. God wants to do something and wants to show something, the more meaning of the creation, or do, and then also letting Adam to know. So word built, it is like that is now just like houses, cities, towers, and altars are used. It is now being built. It is used like that way. So through this, we can see God's provision and God's creation. It is not simply done making the old metaphysical world, but is now God is giving deeper insight, deeper message to Adam, and for him to drawn to praising God and worshiping. That's why verse 23. Now Adam is now praising God, and about like first song in the human history and in the Bible story, that is Adam to God. It is bone of bone, flesh from my flesh, and she is called woman. And so through this story, we can see verse 23. This word this, and then this time in this verse 23 is emphasizing and focusing on this is now is the emphasizing the work of God. This occurrence, bone from my bone and flesh of my flesh from my flesh. And so through this we can see now how God is drawing Abraham, Adam to God, and also about what he had done and praising him eventually. The word woman as well, it is emphasizing, so that referring to the act of God for the man. But we have to also see that the woman itself, and from TDOT, is emphasizing that in Genesis chapter 2, verse 23, it is solely emphasized on the name woman, is referring to the person woman. So at the same time, so through that also insight, what we can see that that is God, that woman itself, like God made, and at the same time, the woman and marriage, it is somewhat is like visible way, but emphasizing the work of God. We have to understand both. All right, so lastly, verses 24, 25. So we can see 24. The emphasis is the leave. After Adam's now praising about what he had done and what God gave the woman to Adam, and then the word leave, God is giving the message. Now you will live. It's not a command, but you will live. It is the telling about repeated at any time, frequently repeated. So continually leaving from your father and mother. And then word Okana tells that the meaning of leaving, actually, it has the meaning, qualitative meaning in it. So rather than really like abandoning your parents, but it's telling about qualitatively, now you became separated, like another being, becoming a father and mother. Then we can draw the meaning from this message. So continually grow in qualitatively as you see what God had done, and also as you recognize that. So as also Harris says that about the become one, Harris says that is actually related to the meaning tabernacle, and it connotates become one people. It's like becoming recognizing the work of God. That also like a Harris he tells in synthetic analysis part. All right, okay, so and then 25 it emphasizes the word is now they don't feel any shame of themselves. The word here in Jessenius, it is now in hit pile, and they will be ashamed of themselves. But when it's in perfect form, it carries the meaning, the continuous action. So when you become one, they don't feel any shame one another as man and wife, and so that they don't feel shame. They don't feel shame continually. So through this, the synthesis of Genesis, I will synthesize all the message so far. So I will, and then I will conclude that God's purpose and man in the Garden of Eden. And so God, he called man and for serving, worshiping God and obeying God, and for keeping, tilting, and to make it better of the garden, and then was diligently working and protecting from other attacks from outside. And that is the purpose of God. First of all, in 15 it tells, and then 16 and 17, God is giving the two ways, knowing permission of God gave everything, but for that we have to know the centrality, the more focus on that message, that is you should not kill, you should not eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. So like we have to know the commandment of God so we can carry out that God's calling. How? Through this story of a marriage, we can see God gave the help that is that makes the person continuously grow, and then also they will live under the grace of God as becoming a new people of God. So by the help is referring to knowing, and that God made this whole creation is not all, but actually God is intervening in man's life, and then as they recognize the meaning why God made this whole universe, and so through seeing the woman, and eventually is now drawing out to the praising God. So conclusion of this story. So I made those again is 5 points of that. First of all, we can see from this story calling of God, and then God gave the commission, that is keeping the worshiping and obeying God's will, and keeping and diligently caring for his creation. Thirdly, God given rights, and so God gave all things for us to enjoy. And then the fourthly, but God gave the law for that, and that is we have to keep sincerely his word and his command. And then fifthly, but God provided the provisions. And that is, first of all, God allowed the lacking room for God's provision in our life. Secondly, so God makes his people to know that God is the resource of everything. Thirdly, God provides his provision when a man recognizes it. And fourthly, God feels it and makes a man. Sorry, it's a mistake. God feels it and makes a man to know him deeper. And then fifthly, God makes a man to praise and worship God sincerely. And sixth, lastly, God makes a man grows to be completely in his grace. So the major lessons I got from here, I summarized into 5 points. That is through the word story, word study, the meaning of the meaning to work and keep. And then through synthetical analysis, verse 16, that is that God gave when the infinitive absolute is used, then the stress it falls on the next following the verse 17, do not eat. Then 18, through the word study, there is the meaning of the Ezer. And then 22, the word build, made into, and God is like I see that in like there is God's continuous provision in theologically God's creation, and also continuously God's reigning over the necessity of God's providence. I think that this is the main point of this story from my study. And so the last part is the word this. It is referring to that the work of God had done. So through this story, typically when we know about the origin of marriage, it is not just like simply getting married, or the woman as just like another gender. But I think as a God's very continuous work in human life, I think is a very important point for me as I study. So that is what I learned. Thank you very much for your listening to me.
The conclusion was so beautiful. Huh? It's
you.
quite interesting. Last Sunday, I shared the same message with my family members. Last Sunday, doing my home, devotion. But anyway, yeah, just a good job. And since we have just about 8 minutes left, any question, comments, please go ahead.
Thank you for the beautiful presentation, Pastor Phineas. Question on verse 17, as you can see at the last two words that mood. So it means absolute, infinitive absolute. My question is, what kind of death is verse 17 talking about? Second, do they really die the moment they disobey God's command?
Okay. All right. Okay. So the 17, your question is, when you eat that, you usually die. The meaning of that?
Yes, my question is, what kind of death is verse 17 talking about? Secondly, did they really disobey God's command?
The second question is, did they really
die the moment they disobey God's command?
Did they really die?
And yes, and another question, what kind of death is verse 17 talking about?
All right, okay. Okay, thank you. From my understanding for the death, you surely die. I think from the context, he's losing his God-given privilege. Is verse 16. Like when verse 15, actually, when God called the man, and then God gave those commands or the work to do, and then verse 16, God is giving the permission and also privileges. But as I emphasized a while back, the absolute verse 16, the infinitive absolute is emphasizing on verse 17, the commandment of God, and so it is really related, 17 and 16. So that when the man is disobeyed, then they will die. They will lose their privilege, and then first of all, I think the death is first of all is related to that, and then also the death is he cannot also have the presence of God just from the context from 18 to 25. That God's working in their life continuously, I think that it be ceased. So I think that is the meaning of that. And then the second question was, did they really die? There was the question, right? So yes, they died, not immediately, but gradually. I think from this, from my analysis, I think gradually die because they don't have the intervention of God anymore. The grace of God, it is not really have them being sustained anymore. So yeah, I hope that is the answer.
Maybe Phineas' interpretation is been more spiritual one, right? So you focused on the spiritual relationship between human being and God. I think that is one of the possible interpretation of the death. Actually, this is a problematic and controversial passage, especially, Albert, you are aware of the issue. That's why you asked the question. So do we need to really apply this death physically? So there are ongoing discussion on this passage. So from the perspective of Seong-Gyu, I think Phineas wants to highlight it and maybe a little bit more for the spiritual side. Well, but it certainly deals with even the physical death as well, because of the fall of human being in all the pains and sufferings. And we are not quite sure about the original status of God's creation. Maybe because of the fall, the death, the concept of death and suffering came into the existence. So in a sense, people die, aging or just dying of any disease, but it's all bringing back to the first place where the fall was taking place. So in a sense that the condemnation upon human physical body and the nature is there. You know what I'm saying? So that could be a possible understanding and interpretation about what it means by death. And there can be other types of understanding there. Or the third one is, could be God's grace, he planned, for this, but his love never ceases, and he is always, giving us the second chance and the grace, right? So even though they are, warned not to it, and then the eternal death was somehow scheduled and destined, but by the grace of God, it was somehow forgiven, and the second chance was given. Something like that. There can be other interpretation too. Okay. Sungyu, Penyas, you want to say something here?
No, sir. I want to show the conclusion so that it can the other classmates they can be they can remember. Yes.
All right. But
One
anyway,
more question, please. This one is a quick one. If we're going to mention this one is like meaning about spiritual death, how can we defend our claim?
How can you what?
How we can defend our claim that this passage is really means about spiritual death?
So you mean if it means spiritual death, then how can we understand about the physical death?
No. My question is, if we're going to say that the death is mentioned in verse 17, it's going to be mean to spiritual death, how can we defend our claim according to the text? Because if we're going to read the whole text, it doesn't say that they die spiritually. How can we defend our claim?
How do you think, Phineas? Because as you said, because you emphasize the spiritual side, right? And then what is your concrete argument to support?
Or yeah, I think this passage from the context, like in between, actually Genesis chapter 2 verse 4 is starting from the this is the generation of the creation story, and so that and then the chapter 3 is about the fall, and so I think it tells about the death and the how like as I started the presentation from Genesis chapter 1 verse 28, the blessing of God, and then the generation, the explanation about the creation story now is following. So I think it is telling about the like a principle of God, how the blessing of God it is now it reaches to the garden or the earth, and so that in the sense the spiritual death, and so it is like I think spiritual death it means about separation from God, and so and also from the disconnection from God's his intervention, and so I think it causes eventually all the even physical death it is brought about, and so I think we can see only from the text. I think we can see like that far, but I think when we also see the passage, we have to also keep the principle as the scripture it tells until that far, that we can also go far only until like that.
All right, thank you. Since we don't have enough time, maybe one more last comment or question.
Can I have one?
Sure. Yeah.
I wanna ask. Wow, I wanna ask one thing about the subject of Adonai Elohim is many times used here, I think. So I think it's very unique expression. Not only Adonai and not only Lord is combined, and maybe if I'm not mistaken, maybe it's in the beginning of this chapter, it's just Elohim, so God. So it suddenly changed. So so my question is, what do you think, why the specific subject is used here many times and why it suddenly changed?
Okay, I think this that is what I presented a while back. Yahweh is used here. Elohim Adonai. It is Elohim in Genesis chapter 1 is predominantly Elohim is used as the transcendent God. It's like His Almighty God and far away from the creation. But Genesis chapter 2 verse 4 and after that, this is explaining how that the Yahweh God, who is the referring to the covenant of God and personal relationship with God, and so now is predominantly is used here in this passage. I think that is related to that how God, after the creating that, how He is dealing continuously in His creation, and so that's why in this passage it is highly emphasized God who is interrelate with His creation, not just like a dualistic thinking, once create and then He doesn't care anymore. But I think it's highly emphasized how He is involving into human life, just like He created woman and the meaning of woman. I think that is also deeply related to that.
Thank you. Actually, just to answer the question, I think you might be interested in the specific criticism called source criticism, which is not famous anymore. But like 20 years ago, this biblical study, especially when it comes to Old Testament, was predominant. Source criticism, which means scholars are saying there are different sources in a book. Even in Genesis, there is Jesus, Isos, Isos, and Pisos. That means Jehovah. So whenever we see the name of the Lord, Jehovah, it is called Jesus. Isos means Elohim. Okay, the source means Deuteronomy, and then Pisos is priestly. So it was really predominant, and everybody was studying. But nowadays, it's getting weaker and weaker. So in that sense, you might be interested. But if we disregard this JEDP source criticism, then one thing that we can say is Jehovah is the covenant name that was only used for the Israelites' God. Elohim could be understood in different ways, right? Could be our God or even pagan God. So in the sense, the name of Jehovah is when it was used, and you can see the covenant name of God. So that absolutely there is emphasis that it is absolutely the God of our Yahweh. But I think when it comes to the certain information of why it is J or it's E or Jehovah Elohim, I think it's still controversial. So you need to really go deeper in that area. So there might be some emphasis too when we use two words, Jehovah Elohim together, Adonai Elohim. Then there could be a sense of emphasis too. So that's it. But anyway, I think Phineas, you did a good job. But as a general comments on it, I need to tell you. In fact, when it comes to the thoroughness of the information that I was expecting from you, my students, in terms of syntax, and word study, and the syntactical analysis. I think Phineas was able to just to deliver everything. I really appreciate it. You deeply engaged with those information. And then I was a little bit shocked to know, is there that meaning there? Even in terms of word study and syntactical issues, and you discovered a lot of meaningful things. Okay? But at the same time, I need to also emphasize another side. When you are dealing with all those information, there is a tendency of making everything special. Do you know what I'm saying? So this is the tricky part, and this is our dilemma. So of course, as an academic work, you need to do this. thoroughly and you need to deliver everything. Somehow the way you deliver the idea should be creative. Okay, if you highlight everything on a certain same level, then even though you got 20 valuable things and everything becomes quite ordinary, you know what I'm saying? So in this sense, I'm not trying to say that you did something wrong, but in a different setting, let's say preaching, you might better break it into some 3 sessions so that you can focus on some important parts. Do you know what I'm saying? The last comment that I want to say is sometimes I can see that it has something to do with the question of the spiritual, interpretation. Of course, everything must be spiritual. But when you go through this academic research, you intentionally try to take away the spiritual side. And that's going to be the last point that you need to deliver as an exegetical point. But when you are doing the academic research, if you really bring this spiritual interpretation, then it can bias you. One thing that I just want to say is your effort to preach, everything is from the Lord. I think that's quite sure. And that's a certain that we can find from the passage. But I remember you when you're dealing with verse 20, especially in terms of the usage of kaya, living, and then you connect the idea to the name of the Lord, kaya. But I don't know how accurately you can bridge the idea to it. It should be very secondary information, although it's interesting. So when you are doing this, you need to focus on the main sources and then try to evaluate it from the distance without bringing the spiritual side too much. Okay, so that there is always a temptation. So sometimes I found your exegetical point too much. You know what I'm saying? Although I was really shocked, and then it's really good that you could find all those things. So you need to strike a balance. Do you know what I'm saying? So just 2 comments on that. But I really like your presentation. I really appreciate it because I couldn't see that you are deeply engaging with all those information that you've learned. And very impressive in terms of the word study and syntax. You know how to do it. So the only thing that you need to work on is to control your energy and then deliver it in a practical and creative way. That's one that I can see. All right. I think when it comes to the general evaluation of today's presentation, I'm very happy. And then the classmates were able to recognize some good points and the weak points. So those who are scheduled to present your works next time, I think it's gonna be a great tip. I think you must learn something from today. So I'm very happy to see you growing, and then I hope to see that in the future, this information and then this knowledge will be very helpful for your ministry and your further studies. Okay, so then I'm gonna see you on Thursday. All right. So do you have any question? No? All right, God bless you.
I have one question.
Yeah.
Actually, when I did the textual criticism, and then a while back, as I presented, I mentioned the way, as we see textual criticism, we see the originality of the passage, but also seeing that also other variants, some approaches, and also valuing in that part. Is that okay, sir?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. But somehow you can just deliver it as secondary sources and information. But since you make your own decision to go for a certain version, then you better stick to the idea. But in the sense that this is the the mindset of the Jewish or the people living in the Near Ancient East. You know, that's how it affects their translation, isn't it? In that sense, you can, you know, deliver it intentionally as a subordinate support, but it cannot be the main argument. Do you understand what I'm saying? So when you are doing the textual criticism, then you need to really choose what is most likely the original text. And if you choose this one, then you need to stick to the idea to support it. Okay. All right. Thank you. So I'm going to see you on Thursday. Bless you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Yes,
God
sir.
bless you.